July 3, 1988, an Airbus A300 rolls down the runway at Bandar Abbas, Iran. The Airbus is headed for Dubai with 290 souls on board. The airplane turned on to runway 21 at Bandar Abbas. The runway stretched out in front of them. Captain Mohsen Rezaeian pushed the throttles to full power as the jet started to thunder down the runway. A passenger looking out of the A300 would see a busy airport as any other, but they would also see F-4s, F-14s, and C-130s on the taxiways and tarmacs. This was 1988, and Iran and Iraq were embroiled in a bloody military conflict. Fighting is intense, and only it was days before that Iraq had conducted air raids on Iranian oil interests in the region. In response, Iran had moved its F-14s into the region to counter any Iraqi threats that it may encounter. This was hostile skies that Iran Air Flight 655 was about to fly into. It wasn't the most friendliest of skies, but many airplanes had traversed it that day. This was all but routine. Once airborne, the controller asked Iran Air Flight 655 to squawk Mode 3, code 6760. An IFF, or identifier friend or foe, is exactly what it sounds like. It tells someone if you're on their side or an enemy, a crucial piece of equipment when you're operating out of a war zone. No one wants to shoot down a friendly aircraft, and instances of friendly fire have been observed in war zones in the past, especially with the advent of long-range missiles. At this very moment, as Iran Air 655 climbed through 7,000 feet, a very different battle was going on the surface. Iran Air 655 was overflying the Strait of Hormuz, a flashpoint even today. With the Iran-Iraq war in full swing, the area was teeming with Iranian gunboats and warships from other countries. On that fateful day, one of those ships happened to be the USS Vincennes, a guided missile cruiser. The waters were tense that day. She was engaging a few gunboats out in the strait. Even though she was a guided missile cruiser, these small gunboats still posed a threat. They are small and agile, and perfect for suicide attacks against ships much larger than themselves. The U.S. Vincennes was dealing with just such a threat when an operator spotted Iran Air 655 on their radar scopes. The radar scopes showed an Iranian P-3 at 60 nautical miles, exactly where it would be if it were feeding information to a fighter before an attack. This information was passed on to William C. Rogers, the captain of Vincennes. The bogie appeared to be unresponsive to hails. At approximately 0647 Zulu, Iran Air was 47 nautical miles from the destroyer and closing fast. At 0649 Zulu, the Vincennes sends out a warning on all open military channels. No response. The unidentified aircraft continued to close in on the Vincennes. At 0650 Zulu, the IFF signature, Mode 2, 1100 flashes on the screen. The IFF for an F-14 fighter, not a civilian airliner. This quickly changed to Mode 3 6760 and held, identifying it as a civilian airliner. They are now 30 nautical miles apart. Due to the IFF reading, a call-out was made on the ship's Combat Information Center, identifying the threat as an F-14. The Vincennes continued to deal with the surface ships as all of this was unfolding on the bridge. The tension on the bridge was palpable. 0615 Zulu. The supposed F-14 had closed to 28 nautical miles. The Vincennes informs the CJTFME that she had an F-14 closing in and she would be engaging at 20 nautical miles if it did not turn away. Warnings continued, but to no avail. 0652 Zulu. Iran Air breaches the 20 nautical mile threshold set by the Vincennes, but the CO decided to not engage. The order was given to illuminate the target with fire control radar. If the target were a military aircraft as they believed it to be, painting it with fire control radar would have let the pilot know that he or she was being targeted, forcing them to turn away. But as this was a commercial airliner, I doubt that they had any idea that they were being pinged by the fire control radar from the Vincennes. 0653 Zulu. They are now 15 nautical miles apart. The captain has to make a decision. If the target is actually an F-14, it could cover the remaining distance in a matter of seconds, and he would be putting his ship and its crew in harm's way. A call-out was made indicating that the aircraft had begun a rapid descent, exactly what an attacking aircraft would do. During the last 30 seconds of this minute, the CO decided to engage the target. At approximately 6 hours, 54 minutes and 5 seconds, the CO turned the firing key. At approximately 6 hours, 54 minutes and 22 seconds, 2 SM-2 missiles left the rails. 21 seconds later, they intercepted Iran Air Flight 655 at a range of 8 nautical miles from the USS Vincennes at an altitude of 13,500 feet. Iran Air 655 didn't stand a chance. The first indication of trouble was the last. They didn't receive any warnings by the USS Vincennes as they operated on separate frequencies. An investigation into the accident had one question to answer. How did an experienced naval crew mistake an Airbus A300 for an F-14 Tomcat? As tensions wrapped up in the region, Iran had deployed F-14 assets in the region. In previous instances, Iranian F-14s had flown at speeds comparable to that of Iran Air 655. As all of this was happening, the USS Vincennes engaged separate surface targets. An already tense situation was made worse. The momentary IFF indication of Mode 2 complicated things. This made them believe that the bogey was actually an F-14. All the while, the USS Vincennes had been blasting out warnings on military frequencies, which the crew of Iran Air 655 never got. The final nail in the coffin for Iran Air 655 came with the altitude declining call-out. This convinced the captain that the unidentified aircraft was in fact a threat. Looking through the data of the USS Vincennes, the radar track clearly showed the airplane was at 12,000 feet, climbing at 380 knots and not descending, as the crew believed. How could such an error be made? How could someone claim that an airplane was descending when in fact it was climbing? The investigation attributed this to scenario fulfillment. To quote the report by the U.S. Navy, since redacted had no doubt that the aircraft was an Iranian F-14 heading towards the ship, and it is not acknowledging repeated warnings, the mind may reject incongruent data and facilitate misperception which promote internal consistency. Iran Air 655's fate had been sealed. The crew now subconsciously believed that Iran Air 655 was an F-14, and the evidence contradicting that viewpoint was rejected. All in all, 290 people lost their lives on July 3, 1988.